Previously on The Devil on G-string. Now it's too long. Your hair. You didn't specify the length, dummy. That's your fault. Usami stopped breathing. It used to be so short that I thought you were a boy. Yeah. The marriage promise, too. How ridiculous. Yeah. We stare at each other. There was a conflict inside me. My admiration toward the hero of my memories was at war with my feelings toward the current Usami. The girl saved me, but Usami Haru is the daughter of my enemy. When you say it so nonchalantly like that, it's no wonder I've always thought you were joking. Well, either way is fine with me. I feel uncomfortable somehow. Let's change the topic. You know what? Sure. Go ahead. Shut up already. Shame it didn't really help you against Big Brother. Seriously? You met with him? What the hell? You know good and well Gonzo doesn't take requests. Wait a second. Was that... I think back on last night's events. After I left Sano's headquarters, my phone suddenly rang. I was dumbfounded. The call was from my brother, who was supposed to be dead. Maou said he had something to talk to me about, and that I should come to the harbor. It shook me up so much that I forgot my current status with Gonzo and reported it directly. I told him that I wasn't Maou, but... now that I think about it, that was Maou's trap. He used me as bait to bring Gonzo to the wharf. Maou intended to kill both of us.
Zero. Kyosuke.
No. There's no fucking way. I clenched my fists and denied the possibility. Sami, you can spout those cute little fairy tales because you didn't know Gonzo. You better listen here. Gonzo was the type of asshole who could knock a man out the first time he met him, then guzzle down liquor as he watched him bleed. And then tell me to violate Kanan to tame her, all in one sitting. And when Tsubaki's kid brother was kidnapped, he beat me silly. And he never saw Kanan as anything but a source of income. Right. And he was a demon to my mother, too. He was as I fucking Gonzo, a fearless, cold-blooded son of a bitch. Which is the truth, Gonzo? Did you jump out of the car just to settle your fight with Maou? Or could it be? A bestial roar echoed through my mind. No, not a roar. It was merely the wailing of a starving cub. I wailed and wailed, but my father never came back from the hunt. No matter how long I waited, he never came back. Thanks to you, members of the Soniyama group left their scheduled work and kept busy a whole night. With labor costs, the warehouse's electricity bills for the night, and consolation money, it'd be more than just 1 or 2 million.
Huh?
Oh, I see. Gonna make her your workhorse? Tokida's face twitches. Anyway, turn yourself in after you've paid it off in full. If you run off to jail before that, I'll take what I need from your family. I glare at Shiratori, making sure Tokida notices.
冗談でしょ?
I think that's the first time I've seen that expression on your face, Yuki. If you really want to find out, try running to the cops. My mother just died, you see. I'm a little on edge. She moans and expects my body. She must be doing her psychological crap again, trying to figure me out. Anyway, there are questions I have about Maou that I think you could answer. Don't go running away. It was one of my favorite performers' debut album. A prodigal child violinist. She was about 13 at the time. Oh no, then this must be Haru. Look at that. You're famous. Mishima. Haruna.
嫌なものを持ち出してきましたね。
Oh? I stare at Usami. They seem similar somehow.
13歳でこんな氷の上にいなくてもいいっすよね。
For real?
マジです。
Mishima. That Mishima?
はい。
This girl is the daughter of Mishima Koharu.
ええ、私の母です。
And so it continues. Greetings, my name is Neosekken, and welcome back to my Let's Play of The Devil on G-String. So, I'll let you guys know this in advance. I'm feeling a bit run down right now because allergy season has been utterly kicking my ass this week. So, if I sound a bit congested or slightly unemotional at times, well, that's kind of the reason why. I'm a bit tired and, well, my nose has been stuffy. I took some allergy medication. I got an air filter running in here, so I'm hoping that will help get the symptoms under control, but, well, if I end up sounding off in any way throughout this entire thing, you at least know why. So, with that out of the way, I have a feeling we're now leaving the eye of the storm, and we're going to be exchanging fisticuffs, metaphorically and maybe literally, with dear old Big Brother quite soon. Usami Haru wandered alone through the bright city lights. It was quite chilly tonight. As she walked around aimlessly, she reprimanded herself for forgetting to borrow a coat from Kyosuke. Something was amiss. There was a scarce few young people hanging around the shopping district. No young men loitered outside the convenience stores. No girls gathered to chat near the clubs. The street corners typically used as meeting spots were completely stripped of waiting youths. The only people wandering the streets were middle-aged con artists. They looked bored without any prey to ensnare. Haru decided to inquire about the strange state of things. She came upon a man leaning against a telephone pole, pressing buttons on his cell phone.
今、なんか街でやってるんですか?
He looked Haru up and down for a moment before losing interest and shaking his head. Do you not like her jogging suit? Whatever it is, it must be big, he said. In the end, the man she approached didn't seem to know any more than she did. I'm getting a bad feeling from this. He confirmed Haru's feelings, though. There was something eerie, downright creepy about the whole situation. Central Boulevard has been very peaceful over the past few months, thanks to the Yakuza power struggle. The police box in the center of the city testified to the amount of juvenile crimes this city suffered. As Haru crossed the main street, a familiar face popped out of a back alley. Hashimoto-san. Oh. Forgot about you. How you been? Found plenty of street alley rats to feed upon to keep yourself full? Hashimoto was wearing a hoodie and jeans, and was accompanied by two boys in similar garb. Oh, look at you. You've been making friends. The hostage case still hadn't been made public. Even so, Hashimoto purportedly hadn't attended school since that night. What was he doing now at this time? Haru followed after him. 20 or 30 minutes passed as she followed him. At some point, the poison oozing from the bountiful neon lights had drained away. They were nearing the business district and would run into it shortly if they continued on course. All that awaited them there was a span of offices. There was nothing of interest in this area for young men. There was no sign that they realized they were being followed. Hashimoto was talking to the other two without a care in the world. They eventually arrived at the rather grandiose Sano Corporation building. There were several luxury sedans parked in front of the entrance. Two men came out of the back seat of one such car. One seemed like an aging gentleman, and the other a pale foreigner. The latter's well-built muscles barely stuffed into his dark gray suit. There was a slight bulge under his jacket, likely a handgun. Shocking point, though, was that the seemingly unrelated Hashimoto began to speak with them respectfully. Haru couldn't see their faces, and their voices were only faint. However, she could tell they had met before. The aging man waved at Hashimoto, as if he knew him well. Haru noted that he was missing a finger. Past encounter with some Yakuza, maybe? Hashimoto crawled into the parked car. The aging man and the pale foreigner stepped in behind him. The last man in, the foreigner, ducked into the back seat after eyeing the surrounding area suspiciously. A vague uneasiness coursed through Haru. What was going on here? Unable to chase after an automobile, she turned back the way she came. Before returning to Kyosuke's apartment, she stopped by her room. Haru frantically grabbed her violin case, then dashed back into the night. That might have been Naito, the head of the Shinye group. Naito, maybe? When she gets back, I ask Usami about the situation outside.
マジっすか？こんな顔だったんですが。
She grabs a notepad I keep on my telephone stand and sketches a quick portrait. Yeah, probably him. Naito was quite pleased to hear that Gonzo had died. He didn't appear at the SOA meetings today or yesterday. Supposedly, he had been ill.
もう一人の外人さんはこんな感じでした。
She drew up another picture with amazing speed. I've got nothing on that one.
何か容器を感じませんか？
Well, it is fishy. We can check it out together tomorrow. We'll take my car. That way, on the off chance something similar happens, we'll be able to follow them. Usami nodded and turned on the television.
ゴンゾーさんが亡くなられた件について警察はどう動いているんですかね。
I think I'm about to sneeze. Crisis averted. The news reported as your everyday Yakuza warfare. Behind the scenes, the police have been investigating a criminal known as Maou for a while now. That's what Gonzo said anyway.
私たちも警察に知っていることを話した方が良さそうですね。
Nah, the news has already spread that Maou was my brother, Samejima Kyohei. I'm sure the police have found that out by now. Detectives will probably come looking for me soon to ask some questions.
魔王はこれまで異常なまでに警察の介入を恐れていましたね。
Yeah. Funny how things change. No kidding. I heave a sigh and stare at Usami. There's something I still want to ask you.
私がなぜ魔王を追っているか。
Yeah. I figure I have a right to know now. I had an idea, though.
浅井さんほどのマニアであれば、私の母がどうして亡くなったかはご存知ですね。
Yeah. It was at a theater in Moscow, wasn't it? Terrorists bombed the place during the performance.
テロの目的はコンサートに招かれていた中東の国の大使だったそうですが、母も巻き添えになりました。
Was that your first encounter with Maou?
ええ。お前は宇佐美の娘かと聞かれました。まあ、話すと長くなりますんで。
Wait, so you met him face to face? Did you actually get a good look at his face at that point or something? Just out of interest? I'll ask some other time. No, ask now. This is information I want to know now. By the way, what's that? I pointed to a violin case laying against the back of the sofa.
なんすかね。
Did you change your mind about playing for me?
どうすかね。
Oh, lucky you. What do you mean, maybe? She reminded me of the old Usami a bit. I lay down on the sofa and jerked my chin at her. I'd like to interview you, Mishima-san.
何ニタニタしてんすか。
I hear you were born in Germany. Is that right?
まあ、
Yeah, so, when someone says Germany, the first thing that comes to mind is automobiles, am I right?
浅井さんのドイツはそんなですか。って、なんで自分がツッコミに回らなくてはならないんですか。
You know what? I agree. It should be the other way around. Yep, something big is definitely gonna go down if we got a role reversal like this happening. Feels weird, right? Usually it's the other way around. If you don't like it, you could always just give me a straight answer.
わかりましたよ。
Did you like chocolate as a kid?
え？
I mean, Japan has a good variety of chocolate, but Europe is its very birthplace. I learned something new today.
まあ、店の前でジタバタしてた記憶はありますね。買ってくれないと動かないみたいな。
Sounds like a normal little girl. Did you watch flamenco performances often? And I'm sure that in most cases of little girls acting like this, their parents is like, sure, whatever, kid, and then just lifts the kid and walks away from the candy store. Crying, screaming, and kicking be damned.
それスペインっすけどね。まあ、旅行で一度見に行きましたね。舞台上で女の人が真っ赤なドレス着て踊ってるんですよ。 自分2歳くらいだったと思うんですが、今でもなんとなく覚えてます。
Maybe she left an impression. Did you like to go on dance as a child?
いえ、全然。自分は子供の頃から凄まじいインドアっぷりでしたから。
So did you play house then?
やってましたね。人形とか買ってもらってました。向こうの人形はやたらリアルでしてね、顔立ちとかちょっと怖いんすよ。
Did your dad ever send you a doll from Japan? Like that one doll, you know, the one that was all the rage. Kari-chan or something? I feel like I should know what this might be referencing, but I don't. My skills as an interviewer are somewhat lacking. Interviewer.
ああ、ありましたね。でもあれはドイツの友達に貸したっきりですね。
That bastard. They never gave it back?
いや、なんて言うんですかね。そういう感じなんですよ、向こうは。貸してあげるって言っても、一度持ったら自分のものみたいなところがあって。
Remind me to never lend something to a German, then. Yeah, I've heard that. Foreigners just take pens or paper without any bad intentions.
ちなみに自分がちょっとずうずうしいのもそこから来ています。
Bull.
でもまあ、日本に戻ってきた時は正直きつかったですね。
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that most people gave you the evil eye when you tried to take their pens and papers. The difference in customs, you mean?
まず給食っすかね。なんでみんなと同じもん食うんだよとか思ってましたね。
Oh? And that wasn't because you weren't used to Japanese food?
いや、ドイツでも和食だったんすけどね。なんでしょう。こっちって余ったもの分け合ったりするじゃないですか。気使うじゃないですか、なんか。
Isn't that a good thing?
そうなんでしょうけど、余ったプリンとか自分が全部いただいたことがあるんですよ。そしたらなんかみんなの視線が冷たくなって。
Yeah, I can picture that.
向こうは自分は自分みたいな感じでしてね。すごいのになると昼食にキャベツとか持ってくる子とかいまして。でも全然浮いてないです。キャベツで OK なんです。
That sounds like BS, but we can roll with it. What kind of place did you live in?
ケルンにいた時は大自然に囲まれてましたね。近くに牧場がありました。と言っても田舎という感じでもなく、とにかく広かったです。
I also hear you lived in Tomobetsu City once. Is that correct?
そうですけど、今と昔じゃ大違いですよ。10年前はセントラル街なんてなかったじゃないですか。
So that's why you were a little lost when you first arrived last year. Central Boulevard practically popped up overnight to us residents, too. It went up quite quickly. Is it true that city development is something the Europeans tend to take slowly?
人も時間ものんびりです。日本みたいに小さな個人商店が大きなスーパーに変わってるようなこともないです。
Note to self, if you want to start a successful chain, go to Japan. They have higher ceilings over there too. Your violin must have echoed quite a bit.
ですね。日本で暮らしてた時はとにかく音がブワーッとこもる感じで、慣れるまで時間がかかりましたね。
We finally got to talking about the violin. Did you start playing the violin because of your mother's influence?
でしょうかね。母のコンサートとか見て綺麗だなって思ってました。
But of all things, the violin?
ええ、楽器は高価だし目指す人も多いし、私がやってみるって言った時、母も複雑な顔してましたね。
Kids don't usually think about consequences down the line.
最初は弾けたら楽しいっていうだけでやってましたよ。音楽教室に通ってたんですが、先生の前で弾くといつも手を叩いて喜んでくれるんです。
Usami looked happy as she reminisced on days gone by.
母も仕事が忙しく、よく家を空けていたんですがね。帰ってくるたびに 褒めてくれました。またちょっと上手くなったねって。自分はそれが嬉しくて、今度はもっと褒めてもらおうとかワクワクしながら練習してました。
I see.
だもんで学校が終わったら夜中までこもって弾いてましたね。寝るか食うかバイオリンか、そんな毎日が半年くらい続きました。
Oh? How were the recitals?
グループで同じ曲を弾くんすけどね、自分だけなぜかちょっと目立ってたらしいですね。終わった後、あなたはバイオリンが大好きでしょうとか言われました。
Sure sounds like she does, at least.
それからはもっといろんな人の前で弾いてみたいとか思うようになりまして。
Her smile was no less than cherubic.
それで母も本格的に自分に教えてくれるようになりましてね。
I never knew this Asami. This innocent girl who spoke of a sparkle in her eyes.
本気を出した母は厳しかったですよ。何をやっても無駄無駄無駄でした。いかに自分が感覚だけでやってたか分かったのは日本であるコンクールに出た時なんです。
Oh?
とにかくやたら怖いんです。静かですし真っ暗ですし、審査員の方はクールですし。
Are contests in the West more friendly?
発表会に近い温かさがありましたね。だもんで結果はひどかったですよ。
Yeah, well, contests in Japan are probably concerned with intonation, rhythmic accuracy, and other such technicalities more than overall interpretation.
一応海外なら評価されるでしょうという一言をいただきましたが、とにかく思い知らされました。だからバイオリンの持ち方、構え方から見直して猛練習したんです。
Did you ever go off to a music camp?
行きました行きました。今海外で活躍しているようなことも一緒になりましたね。こんなすごいこと一緒になっていいのかなとかビクビクしてました。
I can't even imagine Usami being nervous. Did you get stiff shoulders?
いえ、むしろ痛いのは背中ですね。あとは写真とか撮るといつも左肩が上がってるとか言われましたね。筋肉が変についちゃって。
She shut her mouth, as if remembering her normal personality.
まあ今はそんな悩みもありませんが。
She forced a self-deprecating smile, but it couldn't hide her sadness. It wasn't fun to look at. You wanted to be a soloist, right?
ええ、オーケストラは気遣いますね。自分のせいでアンサンブルを乱したらとか思うと無理でした。
She must have been pretty timid as a kid. But you don't have to worry about that in front of me.
え？
I speak to her gently, and Usami's face returns to that of the young girl again. You want to play in front of a lot of people, right? Then let me hear you. This place is soundproofed fairly well, and had better be for how expensive it is. Even if you screw up, only I can hear it. Usami's shoulders shook a little. She took a deep breath, then stared at her violin case. Haru. When I call her, she looks up at me.
わかりました。京介くんになら。
She scurries to grab the case as she blushes. She opens the case gently, as one would open a jewelry box. Inside the solid case was a cloth sack. I could tell just from how much care she put into her instrument. Then, from out of the sack, she pulled a beautiful, aging, glossy violin. Damn, that looks pretty expensive.
実に浅井さんらしい意見ですが、お金には変えられません。
In It must be the violin her mother used.
ちょっとお待ちを。
She rummaged through a bag she had brought along with the case.
チューナーとか持ってないですよね。
Nah, I'm just a fan after all. I don't play.
参りました。忘れてきたようです。
Hey now, you're not going to leave me blue-balled, are you? Though since violins are made of wood, the change in temperature or humidity between her place and mine might have thrown the strings out of tune.
いいんですか?
Yeah, go for it. If it were the rainy season, though, I might be singing a different tune. When the air is exceptionally humid, excuse me, the strings stretch easily, sending the pitch and timbre straight to hell.
一応毎日チューニングはしてるんですが。
Oh, so you still practice daily?
いえいえ、手入れをしているだけで演奏はしていません。
So she's just attached to it.
不本意ですが、わかりました。
She takes a black bar of what looks like a soap into her hand. Is that pine resin?
よくご存知で。
It's commonly called rosin, and she's going to apply it to the horsehair bow. Excuse me, it's not ship. She lightly presses her bow to the bar and glides along it, top to bottom.
意外と覚えているもんですね。
Remember what?
あ、いえ、つけすぎるのも良くないし、かといって足りないと音が弱くなってしまうんです。
So her body still remembers how much to apply.
あ、あざいさん、食器洗い用のスポンジか何かもらえませんか? 長らく弾いてないもので片当てがなくて。
Ah,
使わない方も多いですが、自分は服の下に入れると結構安定するんで。
but will a dish sponge really do?
ええ、自分はよくそれで練習してましたから。
Alright. Do you have a chin rest?
ついてます。と言っても、化粧をしているわけではないので、そこまで気にしなくても。
What the heck? What if you sweat on the violin?
そんな激しい曲を弾かせるつもりですか?
Well, start off with some Bach, I guess.
やはりですか。まあ、バッハは私も好きです。
Hey now, who do you think you're talking to? Saying you like Bach. What do you know about Bach?
バッハの数学的な才能に惹かれました。
Oh, so you do know your stuff. He wrote a song that's the same whether you play it forwards or backwards.
ええ、まるで怪文みたいに。本当に神秘的な人です。
Alright then. I got it. Play Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring.
いけって楽譜もないのに。
You can't just play it from memory? Was the rumor about Mishima Haruna being able to play any song after hearing it once just a rumor after all?
どこからそんなデマが。まあ、なんとなくでよければ聞いてみせましょう。
I'll let you play as half-assed as you want today.
今日のところはって今後もあるんですか?
Of course. You're my woman, aren't you? Embarrassed, Usami starts preparing to play. Oh man, I'm turning off the lights.
またそうやってハードルを上げる。
Darkness permeated my room. Wait. I changed my mind. Play Air on the G string.
浅井さんが一番好きな曲ですか。わがままさんですね。
Grumbling, Usami takes up the bow and puts the violin to her left shoulder. Usami's slender body stands in the moonlight. With hair down to her legs, She shuts her eyes as if going to sleep. She was different from the usual Usami. There was something mysterious about her. Do you need to warm up?
結構です。
She answered bluntly. She lightly grips the bow with her right hand and brings her left hand to the violin's neck. I noticed the calluses on Usami's fingertips when we made love. Her touch was rough and gritty. She must have practiced intensely all her life. Those same fingertips now slowly descended to the fingerboard and lightly pressed the strings. I take a deep breath in anticipation and await her first note with sweaty palms. I'm confident, no, sure, that the melody she plays will be stunningly beautiful. At this very moonlit moment, I am completely enchanted by the girl known as Usami Haru. Her bow reaches for the G string. The string plays the lowest sound.
すみません。
At first, it was nothing but a whisper.
いませんか。
Then her well-formed eyebrows twitched.
ほら、F ホールを這い上がって G 線の上に。
Oh, Lord! Well, that was ear-grating, to say the least. Then, a sound like fingernails on a blackboard resounded through the room.
悪魔がいませんか。
I couldn't believe my ears.
すみません。花井さん、
She starts shaking.
私には無理です。
What? What did Usami just say? The devil?
ええ、邪魔をするんです。いつも。すみません、おかしなこと言って。
I've heard of performers with prodigal talent who put themselves in a trance-like state as they play. Sometimes it allows them to suppress physical and emotional pain during a performance. And sometimes, when they have achieved a state of complete ecstasy, they begin to see fairies or hear the devil's whispers.
やっぱりいませんね。すみません、ドン引きさせてしまって。
It sounded like a joke coming from her, but Usami's body was shaking abnormally.
ただ思い出すんです。
She took a few shallow breaths.
母の指がバイオリンのG線にかかり、ひときわ力強い低音が響いたその瞬間。
Usami! That rumbling drowned out her mother's beautiful melody. The earth shook, and Haru's body was tossed into the air. The sound burst her sensitive eardrums as destruction rained down, raging across the theater. It was the blast of a bomb. The stage, the seating area, the balcony, the boxes, everything vomited smoke into the air. Screams littered the atmosphere. Unintelligible screams of pain and terror. Haru saw someone lying on the ground on the other side of the theater. She saw other things which had lost all semblance of humanity. She saw fragments, pieces of human beings. Chunks of flesh decorated puddles of blood right before her very eyes. Something that looked like a tree branch had landed near the ruins of a crumbled marble pillar. It was an arm, ripped out of its socket. A man sat on the ground near Haru, clinging to one of the chairs. He was holding his stomach, as if in desperate prayer, Something soft of a dull color splashed out onto the ground. It was his intestines. There was blood everywhere. Everything was burnt and blackened. All that remained were the dead and dying. The smoke had frozen the girl so tightly that she wasn't even able to close her eyes. The world around her had completely changed. Her mother's skillful performance had at some point become an ensemble of low-pitched groaning. There were screams, and at the same time, a barrage of automatic weapons fire. The shots fired mercilessly in front of her. A few streams of blood surged out like snakes. Only after seeing that was she finally able to clench her teeth in fear. Death was near. Sometime after she had finally accepted her inevitable death, a voice called out to her. Called out for her. Haru, Haru, it said, seeking the girl. She tries to squeeze out a reply, but couldn't. Her mother had been an expert at manipulating sound at will, yet the only response Haru was able to offer her, a response that would turn out to be her final words to her mother, was a raspy wheezing that hardly qualified as speech. A new voice called her, this time a calm one from above her. He was dressed head to toe in black. The balaclava he wore covered his face, but his eyes laughed boldly at her. The man's figure, distorted from the hot air, seemed akin to one of the devils straight out of hell. What answer the girl gave the devil, she does not remember. But she must have given him a name. The devil returned a scornful smile. Some Middle Eastern language was being shouted about. The devil replied in the same tongue. The blood at his feet splashed.
Maou.
After that, something inside the girl broke. Like a violin missing a string, her heart stopped functioning normally. In exchange, she gained hatred. She gained hatred at the cost of her ability to play the violin. Kyosuke, has anybody ever told you that your brother's a dick? Usami's breathing was becoming rough, and her face was getting so pale that I was able to notice it from the moonlight alone. I know. Now calm down. Why is Usami, a passingly normal young woman, chasing a dangerous terrorist, Maou? I finally understood the reason behind that reckless act. She was merely wandering around, grief-stricken, searching for salvation. I see. You did well to tell me. It's all right. Would you go up to her and give her a hug? Don't worry about it. It was my fault. I reached out to hold Usami. Thank you! Don't worry about it. I'll do something about it.
なんとか。
Her tone suddenly lost all emotion. Yeah. I'll catch Maou. That seemed the only way to save Usami.
捕まえる。
Her eyes went wide. Despite all the experiences we shared, we were still different people. I didn't understand a single ounce of Usami's despair.
違います。殺すんです。
That night, I learned of the demon in Usami Haru's heart. The chains which we inherited from our parents had become our very own karma, binding us into an eternal winter. You'll be able to play again someday. No, I'll make her able to play. I'll do it with my own hands, not through unheard prayers to a useless god as I used to. As one single human, as one single man, I'll protect Haru. We had sex many times that night. We saw each other like animals, and I released my seed inside Haru. It was violent sex. Sex aimed at capturing the other's soul. The night wore on, as exhaustion took us, we fell asleep in each other's arms. The day has come to execute my final plan. I can't help but look back at the 10 years I spent in preparation for this. Inspired by my father, Samejima Toshikatsu, an employee of a train company, I aspired to study overseas. 10 years ago, I was just a kid. I had no money or power to speak of. I attended the Imperial College of London, hoping to gain the qualifications necessary to work at my father's company. My younger brother Kyosuke was still young and unreliable. When I returned to Japan every now and then, he'd make me play video games with him. His amiable personality and overall sociability was just like father. I remember him following me around, taking pictures of me as I helped mother with errands or chores. Thanks to father working himself to the brink, our family was never poor. Regardless, I refused any money they tried to give me to help pay for various expenses as I studied in Britain. I knew that mother, with her weak disposition, could have fallen ill at any moment. I also knew that father wanted to bring their life into the family. However, I did need the money. Thus, some friends and I decided to found a small import-export business in London to help pay the bills. Calling it an import-export business makes it sound impressive, but it was just peddling cheap junk. We sold t-shirts, pencils, Buddhist statues, and other such Japanese rubbish to shops in London. Japanese saran wrap and toiletries sold well for some reason, and there were a significant amount of orders for underwear emblazoned with kanji logos. Father would often package such novelties and send them to Britain for us. "You'll be a great trader someday," he told me. He always supported me from the bottom of his heart. I met Alan one day as I walked into a pub, trying to hawk an air freshener that promised extra effectiveness against the smell of alcohol. He looked to be in his mid-40s. He wore a houndstooth checked flat cap, a cheap faux fur windbreaker, and worn old slacks. Sipping a Guinness and lighting his pipe occasionally, he looked like your everyday working-class Brit. "All right, mate," he hollered as he waved me over with a smile. He bought something from me right off the bat. He said he loved Japan, and he would be a good customer. As we talked more, we started calling each other by our first names, and by the time he offered me a drink of sake, he already knew my background, specialties, and interests. Being raised in a peaceful country like Japan, I was hopelessly vulnerable. A young Japanese man was like clay in the hands of a veteran recruiter like Alan. By the time he first said the word mercenary, I was drunk. I'm a mercenary. My drunk self was more curious and cautious about that unfamiliar word. Supporting the business of war at its core was the lowest level of those so-called merchants of death, mercenary recruiters. Any system with the possibility of cooperation will eventually spawn a profit-based equivalent. And with the monstrous amount of money involved in war, there will always be monsters out there looking for a cut. The military-industrial complex. And in any case, Alan himself was not working for some Arab big shot or some capitalist corporate giant, but a monster that happened to deal in smaller figures. He had the proper qualifications and was a formal member of a recruitment agency. However, mercenary recruiters are not permitted to act out in the open. That law exists for diplomatic reasons, as a conformity to international law, and the connections to underground organizations cement it as an important rule to follow. Alan's talk captured the intention of his green listener. He tried to sweet-talk me into joining up as we drank Kurosawa and Yamato Damashi, and like a missionary for an evil cult, he waited patiently until his prey was no longer able to think. Still, I never said yes.
人殺しは悪です。
I wonder if that thought was ever racing through your head as you helped to bomb that stadium full of people. As if to say he already knew that, he laughed and replied, "But murder can sometimes say things that justice can't." I found that difficult to understand. It does stir a man's sense of adventure, but there's no reason to become something as mysterious as a mercenary. Warfare may be an unfortunate constant in this world of ours, but it had nothing to do with me. If you ever find yourself in need of power, call me anytime, Alan told me. After that day, a long time passed. My little sister was born and died. My father's silhouette, broken-hearted before Kiyomi's little Kiyomi's portrait, is still burnt into my eyes. And soon after that same father was arrested under suspicion of murder. When I received the news from Mother, I abandoned studying for my upcoming Arabic midterm and returned to Japan. Tomanbetsu City's holding cells. I was turned away 3 times under the excuse that they were still investigating the case, but I was eventually allowed to visit Father.
手紙は読ませてもらいましたよ、お父さん。
Father nodded from behind the acrylic plate. Above his droopy cheeks, his worn-out eyes told of his lack of sleep.
心臓の方はどうです？
Father vaguely shook his head. Not once in the letter did he whine, but he'd fainted a few times. The fainting spells were bouts of heart disease. He'd suffered from it the night he cried in front of Kiyomi's portrait as well.
死刑だなんて大げさな。どうか諦めないでください。
Father had killed Usami Yoshinori, his subordinate Kato, and two of Usami's other mahjong friends who were present. Is he going to be given the death penalty? There are plenty of reasons to be sympathetic toward him. Nevertheless, his crime was premeditated, and it couldn't be helped if they saw his method of killing as brutal. He was just possessed by his urge to kill at least Usami. The rest of them were just small-timers, riding off of Usami's power. They could do nothing but mock Father. Then again, I personally think it's those kinds of vermin who deserve to die. When I spoke with a lawyer friend of Father's, he was unable to confidently determine whether or not Father had a chance at life. The decision wouldn't be made for 3 or 4 years after all. I was incredibly worried. What truly disturbed me was that the world sympathized with Usami. As Father's letter detailed, Usami was a fraud and a chronic gambler. None of this was reported in any newspapers or television programs. That's the news for you. Lies by omission. Apparently, Usami had connections to politicians. There you go. That basically explains the lack of information about his gambling habits right there. Perhaps his famous wife, Mishima Haru, had something to do with that. Would these things affect Father's sentencing? I wondered.
安心してください。万一に備えて死刑廃止論者の団体の方々にも今日。
But each time I attended their meetings and study sessions, I lost more hope. What I wanted to save wasn't this country's future, but my father, a man who might be sentenced to death. Kyohei. Father gently called my name. Thanks, Kyohei. Father's tears lent a certain air of fulfillment to his eyes. I mustered my courage and replied.
お父さん、あなたは人を殺したことに後悔はなさっていないのですね。
Father bit his lip. I'm sorry. That sentence was certainly not aimed at Usami or the other three, but at our family. I imagined the scene of the inevitable trial. The prosecution shouting things like, the defendant shows no signs of regret. Indeed, Father would never submit to Usami's memory, nor should he have to. Kyohei, can a genius like you answer a question for your old man? He looked to be begging Buddha for salvation. Am I the demon everyone says I am? Indeed, he is a demon, my reason and morality whispered coldly into my chest. He loved his family more than anything else. Wait, did I read that sentence wrong? No, I didn't. The smiles he brought to us were countless. I felt something burning inside me, and I cursed my ingrate reason and morality.
父さんは正しい。
He'll always be, to me at least. That sentence, that determination sealed my life's fate.
お父さん、俺はイギリスに帰ります。しかし、必ず戻ってきます。何年先になるか分かりませんが、希望を捨てないでください。
There was no way I was going to sit back and suck my thumb as the judicial system pondered his fate. I returned to Tomabetsu City, packed my bags, and said goodbye to Kyosuke and Mother. They were both worried at my departure, but wallowing in our sorrows wouldn't save Father. I entrusted Mother to Kyosuke and returned to Britain. My only miscalculation pertained to the beast, named Azai Gonzo. The Yakuza debt collectors wouldn't relent on Father's debt merely because he was in jail. Mother, left behind on her own, fell into Gonzo's clutches, but I was left in the dark about this until far later. Alan greeted me with a huge grin at the aforementioned pub. I thought I'd see you again. I asked my one question bluntly. If I follow you, will I gain enough power to free a prisoner from jail? Alan's gaze when he looked at me then changed for the very first time. I just procure mercenaries. I had no idea you wanted to be a terrorist. I didn't care what he called it. Terrorist, mercenary, soldier. I didn't care. All I wanted was to find a way to save my father. Well, work with us for now. Lots of our people declare themselves free agents after 2 or 3 years. It wasn't like I didn't have any hesitation toward going with Alan. It would mean having to go years without any contact with my mother in Japan. It was only when I got involved in the London underground bombings that my resolve strengthened. Terrorists, angered by one of Britain's national law issues, blew up a subway platform with a suitcase bomb. There were around 500 casualties. Jesus Christ. And one of them was me, as I walked down the entrance stairwell. My only injury was a bruised waist, but I was swept into the waves of panicking commuters and lost my bag, my wallet, and my passport. I jumped out of my seat as I watched the news the next day. On the list of the deceased was written Samejima Kyohei, Japanese. So, this faking your own death bit was purely accidental, and you just took advantage of it, huh? Hold on. Yeah, okay. Just double checking, make sure I'm not misreading anything. I'm being extra cautious because, like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I am feeling a bit tired. Want to make doubly sure that I'm not misreading anything. The London police force's half-assed investigations were so infamous that I'd even heard stories in Japan, so it wasn't all that surprising. For example, a month after I enrolled in college, a friend of mine was arrested. He was charged with sexual assault. Because he had an alibi, he was eating with me at the time. He was quickly released. Apparently, the police barged in arresting him merely because his girlfriend accused him. There was also a strange case involving another university, where an assistant professor was surrounded during a lecture by police toting submachine guns. This too was because of a single testimony, this time by a Pakistani immigrant. Because the professor looked similar to a terrorist. In Japan, where people are only arrested after concrete proof of a crime is discovered, these false accusations rarely happen. But in Britain, these false accusations run rampant. The media makes it a big to-do about the case nearly every time, ensuring that even after the charges are dropped, the damage has already been done. I can understand that Britain has been under terrorist threat for a long time, but it's gotten to the point where it's unsafe to walk around at night. People have been shot in the streets without any attempt at an arrest. Thus, I wouldn't be surprised if the man in immigration control assigned to the case was simply too busy shooting heroin to make a call confirming my death. When I was about to tell the embassy that I had merely dropped my passport, Alan stopped me. If you stay dead, it'll shave 5 years off of you fulfilling your dream. It was later, when I started working as a mercenary specializing in intelligence gathering, that I'd fully realized the advantage of playing dead. Alongside the recruiters, there were also people who sold falsified records. For example, in Britain, there were Indo-Pakistani immigrants who were subcontracted by certain big shots in the mafia. They have a lot of big connections around the world, so as long as your request isn't too unreasonable, they'll help you cover up your past. They sold passports, driver's licenses, and ID cards from various public organizations that allowed access to bank accounts, credit cards, or traveler's checks. You could buy pretty much anything you needed, as long as you had the money for it, of course. But regardless of how sloppy these countries' identity checks were in the face of modernized society, having a dead person pose as a dead person will always be far more reliable and economical than having a living person do so. After all, when you're officially dead, you don't have to worry about being the subject of any ongoing investigations. It also makes it impossible for someone to get an accurate profile of you. Kyohei, you're a man of outstanding talent. Alan wasn't like the average recruiter, swaggering around Tomebetsu City's Central Boulevard like they owned the place. The only people he had his eyes on were people who seemed promising, even if inexperienced. I had no intent to answer his expectations. I just signed a provisional contract to fulfill my own goal. The next day, I paid my lodging costs and headed to a rural area on the outskirts of London. At first glance, it was just a regular farm. No, it was a regular farm. There were cows, goats, and sheep, and people milking them without a care in the world. They said the training camp was just the farmer's side job, but it was obviously being financed by some conglomerate or syndicate. In other words, he must have been a high-ranking warlord that no doubt has more than a few mercenaries under contract. Needless to say, he was quite wealthy. And a common aspect of the wealthy in any country would be their propensity for cutting costs. Our lodgings were coarse, our meals mostly scant and vegetarian in nature. I, along with all the other fools that fell prey to the temptations of the devil, was assigned to a group of 5 or 6 people. We all then underwent medical and fitness evaluations. During the initial stages, there was a heavy emphasis on exposing any special skills or experience that might be of some use. More often than not, this took the form of an intense interrogation. It felt like we were part of some twisted livestock competition. However, since these procedures were only a formality, people like fugitives, deviants, and the like were not filtered out of the selection. Britain is a country of varied races, so naturally the people gathered were also quite varied. I was forced into a sweatshop alongside an extremely pale man, and after 3 days there, I caught a glimpse of a veritable giant sobbing. After having my aptitude harshly evaluated, I was called into another room. There, I was beckoned over by a stern-looking Caucasian dressed in military uniform. Apparently, the fact that I had told them I was a black belt in karate had caught their attention. The man was less intimidating than he looked. I had gone to a fight on the streets of London once before, but Westerners in general have a tendency to try to subdue you with physical strength. As long as you take the proper distance and avoided their unrefined charges and kicks, one swift counter to the vitals is all it takes. But putting my skills on display like that was an act of suicide in a way, as it resulted in upping the level of training I received. Once you reach the 5th level, they send you off to the battlefield. This facility, given the name The Pen, is one of many scattered through Europe. It was indeed common for these war ranches to camouflage themselves as everyday crop or dairy farms, but in some countries, they operated right out in the open. After the cattle parade was over, I had signed a contract with a mercenary contractor. I was sent to a military school in Switzerland that was famous for turning out soldiers of fortune. My instructor there was a man that went by the Devil. He was a short, slender man, and he was such a gentleman that if it weren't for the military uniform, you might mistake him to be the manager of a fine tailoring business or the like. For someone who went by the Devil, he was fairly mild-mannered. He was nothing like the cruel drill sergeants you might see in a movie. I had heard he was an ex-member of the British Special Forces. Of course, there was a sort of unwritten rule that one mustn't talk about one's past, so to this day I don't know for sure whether that was true or just a rumor. What I do know is that the Devil certainly could display some incredibly advanced techniques. Between lights out at 9 p.m. and rising at 4 a.m., the Devil would occasionally launch a guerrilla attack on us as we slept. The curriculum was divided into field and study. In the field segments, we covered topics such as the usage of munitions, marksmanship, the proper methods of arming and dismantling bombs, sabotage, close quarters combat, and reconnaissance. The study segments covered subjects such as communications, navigations, survival, and the like. This definitely does go quite a ways to explaining your massive skill set. Due to the harsh training, there were some among us who dropped out. Some even became handicapped after an accident during training. The only reason things went smoother for me was because besides my native Japanese, I was fluent in English, Arabic, German, French, and Spanish. You like playing around, don't you? What a child. One day, after a training session in close quarters combat, the Devil came over to offer me words in a rare, harsh tone. It's true, I did have a habit of taking my time in finishing off my opponent after getting them to the ground. I held off because I wanted to see how they would react when thrown into a predicament. You had a bit of a smile on your face. You know that? I actually had never noticed it myself, but regardless, it was a rhetorical question. Try paying a little respect to your enemy. I'm not trained psychotic murderers here. The British gentry have a set of prerequisite virtues before one can call oneself a gentleman. On the one hand, he was teaching us how to kill people. On the other, he was preaching morals. I was probably on edge with murderous excitement at the time. After all, I was being taught how to kill people day in and day out. During meals and breaks, everyone always looked down in silence. We didn't want to see each other's faces. If we did, we'd probably want to kill each other. Asking us to respect our enemy as we were being eyed by gun-toting guards was simply preposterous. I couldn't help but grab my stomach and laugh. Then how do you explain the brutal acts performed by some British soldiers in the last war in the Middle East? Hypocrites honestly believe that the good deeds of the few can really save the world over time. If you want to put up the smoke and mirrors on someone like that, just draw up an analogy on a grander scale. Mention human nature. Talk about a whole nation. Discuss the inherent implications of society, currency, or property. Simply start a conversation with something akin to a didactic? I don't think I've ever read this word before. Didactic. Simply start a conversation with something akin to a didactic novelist's opening, and you're guaranteed to hit a hit or two. I was fully prepared to be struck for what I said. But that was the first time I had felt respect for the devil. That's exactly right, child. Where are we right now? A dump, I answered. That's right, a dump. Right now, an unprecedented terrorism threatens Japan. People continue to die every second in Africa. But that has nothing to do with us, for we do not live in the world. We live in the individual. And then the lips of the devil, who had just earlier removed his gentlemanly mask, twisted it into a smile befitting his name. This facility is one of the most preeminent military academies in all of Europe. Our alumni are, as a whole, either emotionally numb or have their own personal dark beliefs, which they cannot or will not shoulder onto anyone else. I expect great things from you, he said as he tapped me on the shoulder. I understood then. Let us assume that right and wrong, good and evil, are subjective concepts. Thus, without any objectivity to guide you, without any semblance of reality or fact, one can truly be a king of evil when living when living in one's own personal reality until the bitter end. Only in one's own mind can one truly be the devil, the Maou. At any rate, mercenaries aren't trained to become charity workers. If a cadet fails to graduate from the academy and get on the market after 2 to 5 weeks, he won't make it in the industry. At my graduation, the devil proposed a certain code name to me. His own, the devil, in my native tongue, Maou. However, not a single mercenary or assassin in the world would use such a joke of an alias. Only when I was among certain companions, or when an operation did not require the use of a code name, did I go by the name Maou. When I did so, I thought back to my old instructor. Granted, that was only because by the time I made it into my first battle, the devil had already passed away. They say a new recruit's reaction to his first kill can vary from person to person, but I was so composed at the time that it surprised even my unit commander. I set an ambush for the enemy by taking aim from a hiding place in tall grass, just as I had practiced in training. All I did was pump lead into whatever moved. I didn't see any reason to be deeply moved over something like that. I could hear the murmurs of the devil inside me, breathing into Samejima Kyoei's ears. These are not remains, but a body. It is not the dead, but an object. Those whispers protected me from guilt, regret, and escapism. After the battle, an American that had been put on point was crying and muttering to himself. I'm not a killer. I'm not a murderer. Murderers are people that go after those weaker than themselves. I can't be a murderer. Being placed at the front was a form of consideration meant to ensure he didn't fire upon an ally in derangement. An act of consideration, huh? That's what you call it? When we began to relocate for our next campaign, he suddenly turned around and pointed his gun at an ally. At that exact moment, as if he was expecting it to happen, the commander shot him dead on the spot. I too had my gun at the ready. The lesson I learned that day? Making excuses for your actions will only get you killed. I roamed the battlefields as a mercenary for about 2 years. My jobs lasted anywhere from 2 weeks to 5 months. I worked as a guard for a diamond mine, participated in the annihilation of a group of fascist guerrillas, and even participated in the front lines of a feint operation as a member of the army for a country that did not have its own special forces. I could have sworn I was a goner on that particular job. I got separated from my guide in the middle of the jungle, but I was fortunate enough to stumble upon and secure a safe water source and make it out alive. 2 years later, I reunited with Alan. Looks like I was right about you. You did well to make it this far. The relationship between a mercenary and his contractor was like the relationship between a prostitute and the Yakuza drug dealer she buys from. In other words, you're trapped in a hell where no matter how much you work, you'll never make a profit. In fact, some of my fellow comrades had been sent to a military school by their contractors even after their contracts had expired, in order to provide them with further training. The amount of money you could get as a novice mercenary was no better than the salary you would earn working in a convenience store in Japan. But even so, it was enough money to allow people who came from warring third world countries to feed their family for years. It's not like you got into this business for the money, is it, Kyohei? That goes without saying. Money was necessary, of course, but in order to put my plan for revenge into action, I would first need some connections. That's right, revenge. Ending dozens of human lives for no reason in particular had changed my way of thinking. So my dad had killed Usami and 3 other people. What of it? They were all vermin. They weren't local militia fighting for freedom. They weren't child soldiers from the Middle East who had been taught nothing but how to kill from the very moment they were born. In fact, in my eyes, they were rare examples of people who were killed for a reason. Even if you were to kill a civilian, you would not be court-martialed as long as your side won. And as I saw more and more of these travesties, I came to find the fact that my father was going to trial at all to be absurd. As a child, I had talked about wanting to save my father. Now I found myself driven by the impulse to destroy everything that Japan stood for. You're a free agent now, Kyohei. I hope you don't mind me trying to recruit you again, but as a full-blown merc this time. I told him that I'd had enough of going into armed conflicts with blazing guns. To be honest, I just wasn't cut out for combat. My main downfall would be my tall build. A bigger body makes for a bigger target. In fact, most of the soldiers you see bragging about their prowess are the ones of normal height and build, people that wouldn't stand out at a glance. Occasionally you'll see one of those big-muscled gorillas like they show in the movies, but most of those either meet a quick death or go mad and become useless. To exacerbate the problem, I apparently had a disrespectful habit of treating the whole process as some sort of fearless game. I never actually intended it to be that way, but people had pointed out to me on several occasions that I unintentionally avoided striking vile areas. On the battlefield, where a split-second judgment could mean the difference between life and death, this was a fatal flaw. However, I had a certain talent in liaisons due to my language studies. For the second stage of my revenge, I began gathering experience in espionage and intelligence. When someone says mercenary, most people generally have the preconception of a soldier, and I was honestly no different. But as one would expect, the jobs requested by clients that put forth the best pay are, naturally, quite difficult and highly confidential in nature. They usually have months, sometimes even years of planning put into them beforehand. Also unsurprisingly, these jobs came with harsh prerequisites. One of the reasons Alan wanted to recruit me happened to be because I was Asian. Japanese people are a scarcity among mercenaries. Because of this, I was sometimes given opportunities to pose as someone of Taiwanese, Korean, or Hong Kongese descent. Of course, I posed as an innocent Japanese tourist on occasion as well. This allowed me to get around and do my work freely, without suspicion. I suppose I don't have to go into the importance of information warfare. Needless to say, the pay was on a completely different level compared to when I was an infantryman. But the risk involved justified that. Since mercenary work is not protected under any treaties or agreements, I was in danger of becoming just another unidentified corpse at any time whenever I infiltrated enemy territory with a fake passport. Since a dead man is difficult to track, I quickly earned a reputation as an excellent spy. On one occasion, when I was in Moscow placing bids on military-grade explosives, a very interesting story caught my ear. A famous violinist by the name of Mishima Kawaru would be playing a concert at a nearby theater. The officer who told me of this said that there was going to be a high-ranking Arab official in the audience, and that he was keen on cooperating with America. Thus, he wanted to kill him. However, my attention was purely on Mishima Kawaru herself. Usami Yoshinori's wife. Great. Let's kill him. The decision was no more difficult than deciding what to eat for breakfast. The officer returned a smile. Having built up a decent number of connections, I gathered a group of men that would do anything for money, with the help of my mercenary friends. It mostly comprised bodyguards for high rollers and extensive drug cartels and kidnappers for hire. I acted as the team's commander. In an attempt to misdirect the police force, I leaked information beforehand that there was going to be a bombing at a bank across the city. It worked rather well, as the operation went off quite smoothly. I smuggled in the C4 personally. The image of a Japanese tourist, that incredible free pass to whatever event you may desire access to, worked brilliantly. I succeeded in placing the detonator, and then waited until Mishima Kawaru's performance to set it off. When I finished off Mishima Kawaru as she lay half dead from the blast, I felt a strange sense of anticlimax, like I had just finished my taxes or something. It was then that I first met her daughter, Usami Haru. She called herself Hiro, probably from insanity induced by fear. People may be right about me when they say I have an irreverent habit of playing around. The video games I played with Kyosuke had always had a righteous story about a hero whose village was burned to the ground. After coming to terms with the loss of his family, the hero would gain power over time and eventually come to defeat the evil demon lord, that is, Maou. If someone were to ask me why I didn't kill her, I could only answer that it was because it would be more interesting that way. No. To be absolutely honest, the conscience which I was sure I had purged began to ache. A father is a father, and a daughter is a daughter. I remember feeling that way even after killing her innocent mother. My common sense ethics had warned me against slaughtering a young child. In the end, as the years passed, I ended up forgetting about Usami Haru. Anyway, I decided to let her off then, especially since I had to worry about escaping the authorities in time. After that, I tried to check up on my father's situation in Japan. His sentence from the first trial was death. My worst fears had become reality. Granted, whether he received life in prison or a mere 5 years, I still intended on putting my plan into action. Luckily, Father had apparently taken what I had said to heart, as he was in the process of an appeal. But the real kicker, what truly bothered me, was my mother's situation. When I secretly went to see her, I found her in a hospital bed. From what information I could gather, it seemed she had been diagnosed with a mental illness. Furthermore, she had been living alone for quite some time. Alone? I thought. Where had Kyosuke gone off to? When I discovered the answer to that question, I seethed with rage. My little brother, the one who I entrusted my mother to, had been adopted by, of all people, Azai Gonzo, and was devoting himself to the pursuit of pittance profit. I had changed so much that even my mother failed to recognize me. I grew more deeply absorbed in my preparations. When one works in the field of espionage long enough, one inevitably meets fellow intelligence workers from a private sector, namely, from trading corporations. And when that corporation is as gargantuan as the Sano Corporation, it would be unheard of not to employ a few people with the task of selling the copious information stumbled upon by the company. I grew close to one such person, and through him, to the CEO. At the time, Sano was experiencing a few problems common to multi-billion-dollar enterprises. Meeting sales quotas in a million-dollar company is simple. One only needs to sell a few Mercedes-Benzes or a yacht or two to maintain growth in revenue. A billion-dollar company, though, is something else entirely. It's a near impossibility to hold such incredible capitalistic power without dipping into military affairs. In Sano's defense, they did have a secret factory in Latin America running to supply weapons to third world countries, but in the end it amounted to a mere fraction of a percent of the arms dealing business as a whole. Thus, I propose that they use another company under their umbrella to export manufactured weapons out of Japan. Weapon exports are outlawed in Japan, but that is exactly why they would lead to profit if successful. There are a good number of independent weapons dealers in the world, people that sell out of an attaché case. I set them up with Sano, established a few bases along fishing harbors in Japan, and cultivated a market. We set out from harbors in Niigata and Fukui that made deliveries over the sea to a North Korean vessel. This sounds like some of the deals that Yuki attended him with. Thinking about it now. From there, we formed a land route from Pyongyang to Vladivostok. I never even heard of some of these countries before. Once in Russia, we sent our goods all the way to Moscow, and at that point, we didn't have to worry about being tracked. Furthermore, while bribes won't work on customs officials in Japan, classic smuggling tricks like triple walling your shipping containers can sometimes get your exports through. And while spearheading Sano's darkest dealings, Maou was busy with a business plan of his own. I consulted with Alan. You want to start up a mercenary contracting organization in Japan? Alan's eyes sparkled. He no longer treated me as the greenhorn child I once was. He now recognized me as a fully independent adult. I know that Japanese are in high demand. That's why I had my eyes on you. But Japan is a prosperous country. Who do you think is going to apply? I can't imagine there's much profit to be had.
私も裕福な家庭に育った。けれど、物質的な豊かさに関係なく、心の貧しい人間というのはどこの国でもいるものだ。
For example,
未来を担う坊やたちです。
To a Westerner like Alan, the Japanese give off the impression of a very polite, punctual, and communal people, always concerned with what their family and other people think. For example, corporate scandals are publicly apologized for by a representative of the company. In the West, even heinous criminals don't apologize to the bereaved family very often. Some theorize that this sort of peer pressure, or desire to fit in, formed a loose standard that functioned as a sort of deterrent against the emergence of violent criminals within Japan. But in recent years, the change in social environment has weakened the sense of unity amongst Japanese, a trend marked by a rise in individualism. Heinous crimes committed by young children who received insufficient love and attention at home or have been ostracized by their peers in the community have gradually started to grab people's attention. I'd spoke to Alan about what I had read in a certain book, and then informed him of my own original, delightful of a proposal.
彼らに銃を与えてみたらどうか。
For example, bullying is a problem in every developed nation. Yet for some reason, child suicide rates in Japan stand out as exceptionally high.
私はひどく悲しいんだ、アラン。これがアメリカだったら、銃を片手にギャングの仲間入りをするという道があったろう。
If we can discover talented individuals and then give them the proper training, you can bet they'll justify our investment when they become capable warriors. This procedure, almost akin to kidnapping, proved to be fairly successful in the West. After all, acting as a mercenary recruiter is a pretty extreme job. And while their numbers have certainly decreased, they're still in operation across many regions in Europe even to this day. You have my full support, Maou. Thus I began my roaming through the streets of Japan. My first targets were the children of corporate presidents and the bastard children of politicians. The rationale behind this choice was that if their training turned out to be a bust, I would at least be able to use them as hostages for ransom from their parents. I soon began to target lower-ranking members of organized crime rings as well, and then the members of biker gangs or the like, who would soon be on their way into organized crime. The talent I sought was that of pitiful children who faced unjust treatment within their family, school, or workplace. Children have nowhere to turn but violence. One of my many pleasures was watching these children grow. I loved to see what they did with themselves after learning how to sell cocaine or being given weapons to rob a bank. The information network among children in Japan was not to be underestimated, as rumors about Maou quickly spread. Eventually, I did have to go looking for talent. Did not have to go looking for talent. Talent came looking for me. To me. In all seriousness, though, it should be noted that it's natural for a boy to want to fire a .44 caliber Magnum at least once in his life. A troubled family background isn't necessarily a factor there. Anyway, among all these children was an exceptional example of talent. Tokita Yuki. My experience with female mercenaries was limited solely to rumors, as a testament to how rare they must be. It was such a shame that Tokita turned out to be an acquaintance of Usami's. Now then.
始めるとしよう。
The Supreme Court rejected my father's appeal for clemency just the other day. I made it just in the nick of time. If my father had been killed, my revenge would have no doubt spread beyond this city's borders. I look up at the Sano building, the place my father once worked, and the place I utilized to assist in my arms smuggling. It's finally time to pay the piper, Sano. I'm here to collect my dues from the despicable organization that unjustly covered for Usami Yoshinori and sentenced my father to capital punishment. My only remaining worries are that Hiro and my traitorous kid brother, Kyosuke. You like playing around, don't you? What a child. I close my eyes, and the image of that old Swiss train center comes to mind as I hear my instructor's voice.
もう坊やではありませんよ。魔王。
Well, that's certainly quite the backstory. And I will admit, it definitely does explain pretty much everything regarding his vast skill set and his connections to the underworld. So, I mean, I don't think I really got any more questions about that particular aspect of this guy at this point. I think this is a good spot to leave things, though, so I'm going to go ahead and end things here. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of The Devil on G-String. If you did and you want to see more content from me, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I will see you all next time. Take care.